come mothers and fathers throughout the land. And don't criticize what you can't understand, for your sons and your daughters are beyond your command.
Bon, bonjour à tous. Donc, nous allons faire cette rencontre en anglais. Essayez. Si jamais il y avait des difficultés de compréhension pour vous, je pense que soit vous pouvez vous aider mutuellement, soit éventuellement vous pouvez avoir un petit coup de main aussi de la vignette. Oui. Et puis en tout cas, voilà, n'hésitez pas non plus à demander. Enfin, je veux dire que ce soit assez partagé, collectif, interactif. Je vais essayer de lancer les premières questions, mais vraiment, enfin, sentez-vous aussi très libre de... Mais y compris de poser une question en français, puis on la traduira en anglais, enfin... Voilà, je dis, on va tous, nous allons tous nous débrouiller pour cela. Donc, thank you for being here and for presenting this performance. My first question would be, well, you have a long story with Fawcett Entertainment, because Fawcett Entertainment began in 1984. You were already at the beginning of this group?
Yeah.
And how did this group, how was it created? Where did you meet and how did you come together?
We all studied, well, the vast majority of us studied together at Exeter University in southwest England, and while we were still at university we decided, well, first of all you and Tim, I think, decided, Richard and Tim Etchells, who's the director of the company now, started working together, and then the rest of us sort of joined in as time went on, and we all decided when we finished our studies that we'd move to another city somewhere in the UK, and we weren't really sure where we wanted to go. We knew it wasn't going to be London because it was too expensive, but it could have been, you know,
Exeter.
All sorts. Well, Exeter not really, because it was very I don't know, there was something...
Sleepy.
It was sleepy and kind of...
and a bit hippie.
Yeah. And we ended up going to Sheffield in northern England because it had cheap buses and good bands.
And I suppose the other thing is the course that we studied was a very practical course. So for 3 years you worked with a group of, say, 10 or 12 people, and every 5 weeks you would make something. So the work was really built around this collaborative process of people being in a room, trying things together, talking, and then creating performances. So when we left university, it never occurred to us to do a play. Like, the idea of doing a written play seemed a strange idea. Our idea of how to make theatre was that you go into a room with a group of people and then you play and you improvise and so on. And so that's the kind of work we've been making over the last 35 years. And this piece is a little bit unusual because its starting point was this text by Agatha Christoph.
Yes, but let us speak later about the performance. I'm also interested in your beginnings, because in England there's a long tradition of theatre based upon actors and text, not upon stage direction or so on. How did you impose yourself? Was it easy to get support, to get audience, to get to perform in theatres? How were your beginnings?
It was difficult, basically.
I can imagine.
Yeah, of course. And we had no money, and but the good thing in Sheffield was that the unemployment was very high, so nobody cared about us being unemployed, so that was fine.
Yes.
So we made our work, and I think we made one show in an art gallery, and I think in 1 year we performed it 9 times, something like that. And this was the first thing we made, and then we had some people who came to see that, and then we had some more bookings, and very, very slowly we managed to find more places to play, and we also managed to get some funding, some money. And so
from National Trust?
Yeah, from the Arts Council.
Arts Council.
Yeah, which is Arts Council of Great Britain, I think it was then. And also a little bit from Sheffield City Council. And,
yes.
So very, very, very slowly we managed to kind of make it work.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we first got paid all the year round after 13 years of being together. So up until that point, we'd do a project and get paid for 6 weeks, and then everybody would have to go on unemployment again for another 4 weeks or something, and then you'd start work again. So it was a fairly precarious way of being. But I think it's, I mean, without wanting to kind of nostalgise that time, because it wasn't great, but I think there was still a kind of a remainder, a remnant of a sort of, I don't know, the best way to describe it, I think, is a kind of punk mentality, where people thought, yeah, I can do that, I can be in a band, yeah, why not? You know, I mean, so there was quite a strong feeling, I think, at that time that it was, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people made use of the economic downturn that was going on in Britain at that time to say, well, okay, if I'm going to be unemployed with no chance of getting a job, I might as well do what I want to do. And I think that
freedom.
Yeah, it kind of, a strange kind of freedom came out of that mentality.
And you said you first performed in an art gallery. That means that your first audiences were people interested more in arts than in theatre?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, there was a reasonable crossover. And it was just that at that time there was an artists-led, it was basically a place where a lot of artists had studios, and they also had a small gallery. And we knew some of the artists, and we started talking to them, and they said, oh, well, you could do something in our gallery space. And we said, oh, okay, thanks very much.
And I mean, I think, you know, the people that we knew at that point, most of the people we knew were in bands, like, or artists. We didn't really know very many theatre people. And I suppose when we started making work, and I would say this is true from when we were at university, that we had quite a big interest in performance art practice, and people who came from that sort of end of the world, and also kind of very visual, almost dance-like performance. And I think we found ourselves taking things from both places. And the problem for us was that the theatre people said, you're too performance art. And the performance art people said, you're too theatre. So we were always caught in this strange middle ground. And we still suffer from that today. With
Sometimes do you?
yeah, with English
Sometimes.
critics.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have a rather conservative mindset.
Yes, because you have international recognition.
Yeah, that becomes difficult in your own country.
Could you say something also about the name of your group? Also entertainment. How did you comprehend this, this name at the time? Is it today a difficulty for you? Have you a new way of reading, of understanding this, this name?
When we were students, we wanted to create a listing magazine for what was going on. We made a lot of different things, and a friend of ours had an idea for the title of the listing magazine, which was Forced Entertainment. And we thought that's a good name for a magazine. And then Tim and I made the first performance together, and we went and played it somewhere else, and we didn't have a name. So we asked our friend Andy if we could use the name Forced Entertainment, and he said yes. So and then when we got to Sheffield, we said, okay, this name's really shit. We have to find another name, because it's just too difficult, it's too long, blah blah blah. And we couldn't find anything that we liked. And then over the years, I think I've come to really like it as a name, because it feels like it is actually a fairly good description of what we do. I mean, we're interested in we are interested in entertainment as a thing. We're interested in humour, but also there's a sense in which we're very interested in insisting on something, like saying, okay, this is it, and really following something to the point where an audience almost can't bear it anymore. So there's something in the name that feels
It is forced.
quite good, forced. Yeah.
And you? Is it your...
Yeah, no, I think that's really true. I mean, I don't know if we've grown into the name like people are supposed to grow to look like their pets or something, but I think it's a more accurate representation of what we do now than it was when we started, actually. I mean, and I think the Notebook's quite a good example of that. I mean, it has a difficulty and a kind of endurance quality to it. But at the same time, I think it's also, happy to be absurd and humorous at the same time. And those two qualities are very important for us now in the work. I mean, when we started making work, I don't think we really understood those things at all. But now, yeah.
And for this performance, how would you present it in your whole work? I mean, you're more on the visual side of theatre usually, with entertainment also.
I mean,
with the visual part is more important in your. Many of your productions.
I think we tend to say that we have a kind of slightly. We sort of swing backwards and forwards between two positions, and we tend to make shows that are quite minimal, like this, and probably not always, but let's say probably more text orientated. And then when we've made one of those kind of shows, we'll go, that's a bit boring, let's go and do something where we run around a lot. So, and then the next piece that we make will probably be louder, more visual, and more movement orientated. Stop. It's not absolutely 100% the case that we always alternate between the two things, but there are two parts of the work, let's say. There are two
And you alternate.
Yeah, roughly. I mean, not rigorously,
not always,
rigorously,
but yeah.
In general,
Yeah.
yeah, I would say that's the case.
I mean, yeah, it's. I mean, it's hard to talk about the other things in a way because you have to describe them so much. But in some ways, you know, within the notebook, there's a real insistence on, okay, this is the job. This. You're going to watch us read all of this book. And at the beginning, people look at that book and they go, oh shit. like when we get 3 pages in, you feel them. You think, okay, they're going, oh no, they're really going to do it. And there's a real hump for the audience where it's like at that point people go, oh, or people go like this. And in a way, once you get over this, if you come with us, I hope you have a good time. And I think there's another piece that we made that we presented here maybe last year or 2 years ago, Real Magic, which is a piece with 3 people that takes the form of, it's like a game show where one person is the moderator and one person has to guess the word that this person is thinking of, and they always guess wrong. And then they all swap positions and they do exactly the same thing again, and they always get it wrong in exactly the same order. And it works, it's 36 repetitions of exactly the same scene, except the scene sometimes elongates, sometimes it contracts so that it takes no more than 3 seconds, sometimes it takes 15 minutes to play. And in a way, what you watch there is these performers with a task, trying to make something happen. And in some ways, and that has a visual quality to it, and a kind of crazy energy, and a soundtrack, and blah, 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 blah. But in some ways, of course, it's very similar to the notebook. It's just this is really playing very carefully just down here on these keys, and this one is doing something crazy right here. But in actual fact, the kind of structuring principles are not so different, and its aesthetic is also stripped down, and in a way no more than is needed. So in the notebook, I mean, you could take away the floor, but apart from the floor, that, I mean, 2 chairs, 2 notebooks, 2 people, that's it.
2 bottles of water.
2 bottles of water.
So the definition of your work could be something that is can be found in most of your production would be making the audience uncomfortable.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I think we move between 2 different things. One is we're very interested in this dynamic with an audience, and I think theatre is a very strange art form, because it's a boring story that I always tell, but when you go to the cinema, and if you don't like something, you can talk to your friend and you both laugh at it. When you go to the theatre and you see something and you don't like it, or it's awful, you feel personally embarrassed. Yes. And this is something that really happens to an audience. And that's a power that theatre has that is quite different, because you are witnesses that are in some way responsible for what you're seeing, or you feel some responsibility for what you're seeing. And I think that's a very interesting element in theatre, because then you can create real difficulty sometimes in the room. And for us that's an interest, but at the same time we're also interested then in trying to make moments that bring people together, that relieve the pressure, that let you know that everything's okay, but in a way to change the temperature of what's happening inside the room. It's something that I think it's a quality that theatre really has at its heart, and that's a thing that we're very, very interested in pursuing, I suppose.
You performed a notebook in front of very different audiences in different countries. Did you notice some different reactions according to the kind of audience, according to the country or theatre where you're performing?
We were talking about this last night, actually, because actually, broadly speaking, not. It's not, and it's not to do with geography. It's not to do with nationality, but there is something about age, and younger audiences find the scenes in the Notebook, especially the sexual scenes, definitely more. You hear a lot of. Older audiences are probably thinking that, but they don't say it. I'd say that's the biggest difference. That's the thing that I really noticed.
It's really funny. The bigger difference can be the makeup of the audience, either in terms of their age or how close the seats are together, how big the room is, how high it is, all of how close you are to the action. If there's a bar in the building, this can make a big difference. In a way, those things are sort of curiously more important. Actually, I would say most shows have pretty much the same reaction.
I'd say the only thing that's sometimes different with this piece is we've performed it a few times in Eastern Europe, and there's a different response to it because it's more directly concerned with the history of the people.
Yes.
So,
in Poland,
Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic. I mean, in those places, I think you feel people have got an investment in this particular story that is different from people who come from Western Europe. I mean, very different if you're British because you haven't experienced occupation in any sense. There are those kinds of cultural differences. I do think have some direct bearing on this piece. But you have to say that I think the most, ironically enough, the times where we've spoken to people with Hungarian roots have mostly been after performances in Britain, actually. This is a really strange thing, but quite often after performances in the UK, we've had people come out and say, oh, that's, I recognise that's the story about my great-grandmother or great-great-grandmother or whatever. So that particular cultural thing is important in this show.
And how do you work? You are 6 people in this historical group for entertainment. Is there still a kind of collective work or collective reflection, or is it Tim Etchells that say, yes, you will produce this play and I will work with you and the other way work on something else?
No. The way in which we work is, we sit down, it's a kind of collective process. Sometimes the impetus can come from different places. Tim is very good at providing maybe an initial thought to say, okay, maybe we should do something like this. But only in that way in which you then get up on your feet and you do something, and then you go, nah. And you know, so I mean, we all talk together, and you know, we make decisions together. So it doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't conform to that stereotype of a sort of director and actors. It's not really. It's not really relevant to how we work.
When you are working on the notebook, the other members of the group are also attending the rehearsals?
In the early stages of working on this, that's what happened, and we because we had to edit the book in quite a serious way, and so we each had kind of really made a map of certain sections of the book, so that then we could lay the whole thing out, and then we could see, okay, this line, what happens if we take this away, what happens if we take that away. And I would say that during the whole editing process and the initial decisions about how we were staging it, etc., that was everybody. And then I would say probably in the last 2 weeks, maybe.
Something like that.
The last 2 weeks, I think it was just Rob and I and Tim, because it didn't make much sense to have.
Of course.
When you have more people watching than there are people doing, it's quite difficult. And
But I think also
then at that point it was very technical.
There was a lot of there was actually a lot of time when it was just you and me going through the unison, kind of going, oh, you put the stress on that, okay, let's try that. You know, I mean, so just working out how to deliver that text at a very sort of technical level that I think, you know, to be honest, Tim wasn't very, very interested in that. You know? I mean, like, he'd come along and watch it when we'd made a few decisions about what we were going to do. And he'd say, yeah, well, I can see what you're doing with that bit of unison, but it's rubbish. Go back and think about it again. But by and large, I think it was just you and me doing very, very, you know, real spade work, real just technical things.
And can you say something about this editing process, the dramaturgical work? I mean, you made many cuts. Did you hesitate? Did you regret? Do you regret that you didn't take this part, this section of the book? How was it?
I think it's, you know, I don't know if people know the book, but one of the things that really drew us to the book was the exercises that the boys do. So in the performance they have the exercise to toughen their bodies, exercise to toughen the mind. But in the book there are many more. So when they see Harelip begging in the street, then they go out and beg. When they see grandmother kill a chicken, they try to kill all kinds of animals. So in a way, these exercises or these attempts to understand the world by doing, those things seem very interesting to us.
Mirroring your work as actors. Yes, in some ways. And I think we had thought, oh, there will be much more of that in the performance. But it became really clear, and this was a surprise to us, I think, that actually we really needed to follow this narrative line. And then we were having to make a balance between narratively what we kept. And I mean, initially we thought we would do the whole book. We planned, the book's not very thick, we said maybe we do the whole book. And our first idea was we do the whole book and Rob and I do the whole thing together in time. And then we said, and we learn it. And before we went through with that idea, I said maybe we should read the whole book and just find out how long that is. And we did it, and it was 4.5 hours. And we said, okay, no.
And then, so then we said, okay, if we can take 2 hours off that, I mean, that's quite a lot of material to cut. So we had to take out, there's one whole strand of a narrative that involves a girl that comes to stay with them, and we removed all of that. And we took away a lot, and then we still had like 3 hours. And I think it was you and I, Rob, Tim was away one day or something, people were away, and we did the most brutal edit we could possibly do. And I think it keeps in place enough of the shape of the book and the tone and the quality of the things that are in it, I hope. So. But it was difficult, and years ago. But when we were first touring it, I constantly felt, it's a shame that, isn't it?
What kind of sections do you regret?
That's great. How could we get this in?
I think all of the exercise, the other exercises are fantastic. They're really great,
amazing.
And we really do regret losing those. But on the other hand, I mean, one of the things that's interesting for us about this project is that we have a slightly problematic relationship with narrative. I.e., we're not very good at it. We can't resist going back to it again and again, but we're not good at overarching narrative structures. And I think when we were making the notebook, all of our focus was on these kind of like little sections, the exercises, the various things that are off to the side of the narrative in a way. But when we started doing it, when we started rehearsing it and so on, I think it became really clear that actually, surprise, surprise, people get into the idea that they want to know what happens, which is, mostly our shows aren't really about people wanting to know what happens, because they cut up into lots of different bits, and finding out it took us like 30 years to find this out, that actually narrative was a powerful force that you could use in theatre. Gosh. Well, there you go. It was quite interesting to us. I mean, because we used to say, when we first read it through, we said, it's great, but then you get all that boring narrative stuff at the end. What are we going to do about that?
Yeah.
And then we kind of said, there's nothing you can do about it. You have to keep it in.
It's just part of the structure of the show. Back.
You have to do all that stuff. It's a bit tedious, but okay. And then I think after performing it in front of audiences, you realise that that's a really crucial part, and a really, enjoyable part, I think. So.
And during these 5 years of production, did you introduce any changes? I mean, did you take off some of the parts, or did you add?
Surprisingly little.
Very little, I think. Very little.
As time has gone by, we've made very, very tiny alterations to the text. I mean, just really little phrasings, where, for whatever reasons, we don't really. Where there seems to be an awkwardness in the phrasing of the translation, but nothing more than that. I think, in a way, it was quite. It's been more, I think, for us about learning how to sort of bring out the shapes and the shades of the actual text, rather than changing it. I think there's quite often in our work, there's a point at which we sort of say, right, okay, it's usually after about 4 or 5 public performances, we say, right, that's it, there are no more changes, we're not going to do any more changes. It may not be the most perfect piece of work, but somehow we've gone beyond the point where we can sensibly make interventions in it. But then you say, right, okay, so this is the thing. What's the best way to do it? I mean, I may think that this section here is a bit stupid, but as I'm going to have to do it every night for the next 6 months, I better work out a way of doing it well, because, you know.
And I suppose, you know, I mean, that, you know, it's always true of any performance that there are two parts to the process. You know, there's the part where you prepare and you rehearse, and then you put it in public. And then it becomes a different object, and you have to then think about it differently. Some of your theories from the rehearsal process are meaningless, and then you really learn how to play this shape with a live audience. Because of course some things that seem easy in the rehearsal room feel much harder, or vice versa.
Hello, sorry for my English.
It's okay.
I have a specific question. I didn't see the notebook, but I saw Real Magic last year, and that was really dynamic and full of energy. And I wonder, what do you do before to going in stage? What is your training if you are like alone in your bubble? Sorry. If you are just alone, or to do something together, or what is your training to go on stage?
We don't have any formal thing that we do. I mean, for Real Magic, we basically do a very fast run through of the whole show, which takes us 10 minutes. And we always call it our little game. So we say, shall we play our little game? And then we go on stage and we go like this, and we do all the positions, and that's it. And some people warm up, some people smoke. Then we go on stage and do it.
And for the notebook?
Pretty much the same. Except we don't do the quick version because it's too long.
We sometimes go through the moves.
Yeah, or we, you know, with the notebook, we would talk about the night before, and we'd say, okay, last night we had a few when we're speaking together, then like there are times when you mishit something, so you try and figure out if you have problems. And then, you know, we talk about how it went and where we thought it was maybe a bit slow, or could we lift the energy here, or can we expand this moment, and in a way just to have a sense of what we think we're going to try and do. But they tend to often be in broader things, in a way. Like, you know, sometimes there's a thing that we might say to ourselves is, how can we make this whole section of the show lighter, even though the content is hard, but how could we make the surface light? And in a way, to have those things to think about is, you know,
but I think the sort of you know, technical warm-ups in the normally accepted sense of the word, we don't really do we? I mean, Jerry.
Yeah, Jerry does. I do some things for Real Magic, and but it varies. I mean, we just made a new show which is called Out of Order, which is 6 people, and it has no text at all, and it has a lot of fighting in it, and a lot of running around, and it's physically very demanding, and there are a certain number of people who do like to warm up beforehand, because otherwise you damage yourself. I mean, it's tough.
Question?
Hello. I wonder, did you want to tell this story in particular, or was it the process which interested you? And
I think the thing that attracted us to this text to start with, it's everything together, of course, but it's the strange duality of the speech. This we form is really interesting, I think, to us, and we I mean, the way we got into making this piece was that we were working on something completely different, and we thought it would be interesting to have some choric speaking, with lots of people speaking together. And we tried doing that, and it wasn't really very interesting. But then we came down to 2 people doing it together, and that seemed a little bit more interesting. And then I think Tim just sort of said, yeah, you know, it's a bit like The Notebook, which we all kind of knew as a text. So we brought that in, and we started, Richard and I started reading that. And at that point we sort of went, oh, that's really very interesting. We like that. It's not really going to work in the show that we're doing now, so let's put it aside as an idea for later. And then we came back to it as a project of its own. So, but it's this, I don't know, it's also that it is, as a piece, it's written in a very specific, you know, it has this very specific form, this use of we, that it's a text that belongs to 2 people, which is kind of unusual, and that it has the quality of, I don't know, let's not say spoken language, but it's a voice. It's not, you know, there's no omniscient narrator in this. There's nobody saying, it was the 31st of July 1943, and blah, 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 blah. You know, I mean, there's none of that. And we're interested in those texts, I think, that have that quality. I mean, the only other time that we've made a piece where we actually delivered somebody else's text was we did a performance of the text of a piece by Sophie Calle, which is Exquisite Pain. In English, I don't know what it is in French, but Exquisite Pain, which is a piece where she, after a very painful romantic breakup, she sort of set herself almost a kind of an artistic but also therapeutic task where she would tell the story to people that she met of her terrible, terrible breakup, and then ask them to tell her a story in exchange of the worst experience they'd had. And then she made a piece about it, and we borrowed the text off her. And again, I think the important thing about that is that they're all of those texts, both her telling of the story that happened to her and her recording of somebody else's telling of the event that happens to them, they're spoken texts. They're texts that you can speak. There's no connecting narrative around them. So that's.
Yeah. So there's a formal thing that we were drawn to, and I mean I think also in that the other thing that's within the book is the way in which the boys kind of construct themselves. And that seemed of interest to us. And the fact that it's set against this, I mean, we understand it as being the Second World War, but in a way, of course, the war is never named, the country is never named, but there's this, it has this sort of quality of like a myth or a fairy tale or something. And I think all of that was something that pulled us towards the content as well as to it as a formal proposition. I mean, I have to say that we did think for a long time, would we really do this? Like we had this thing, we went, you could make a show with this, and it was a bit like, yeah, but really? Like, would we do that? And then we were touring something else, and everywhere we went, we'd have the book with us, and Rob and I would read a bit more on a stage, and then we'd go, maybe. And so, very slowly, we came to.
It begins also as a fairy tale. Little fun. Other tales with children abandoned by the
abandoned by the parents. Exactly.
No money and no way to feed them.
Exactly, and they have to survive.
You are telling us the story in the show, but you are the twins of the story. You are dressed the same way, and was it decided at the beginning, or was it something you had to do to make the things more, less narrative and more acting?
I mean, I think visually it's a strange decision. I mean, of course, there's a lot of strange questions here, because we're not two little boys. I mean, like some people, a good question might be, why didn't you get 2 children to do this? Wouldn't it be better? And in a funny sort of way, I feel like our job is to stand in for them. So we're dressed the same. It's kind of tokenistic in a way, and we both have the book, so it's not like the words are ours, because we did this thing where we tried to learn some sections of it, which was kind of hard for the bits where we go together. And actually, without the books, then it's really strange, because then you go, are you really pretending to be these people? Like, you think, what? That's really weird. Whereas somehow when you have the book, it's like, okay, years later, maybe, you can tell yourself this story, they read you this thing. Or maybe it's just Robin and Richard from Forced Entertainment who've dressed the same in order to read you this thing. But there are many complicated things going on within a very simple set of decisions, somehow. So,
and they are very ambiguous. I mean,
and they are ambiguous.
They don't, in a way, allow you to settle. I think it's
Yeah, and I think it's funny now because, like, it's obvious to us that we wear what we wear because we've been doing it for years. But it's like sometimes I look at the costumes, I think, why did we choose that? Except they look slightly like school uniform or something, or the sweaters with the suit is wrong. It's like a farmer.
Yeah, I think they look like farmers who have gone to market. You know what I mean? Like, put on your best suit, but you've still got your sweater on.
And also,
just in case it turns cold.
We had big questions about the notebook. Like, should they have one book between them? Or should they have two?
Did you try with one? We did try with one.
Yeah. The problem was that we could never then separate us as a picture.
Yeah.
And
that's true.
That was that's kind of a shame.
Yeah.
I mean, one of my favourite moments in the show is when we swap sides.
The action.
And sometimes you do see people in the audience go. And it's so minimal. It's like that is magic. You know? It's like whoa, guys! I don't know where I am now.
The big dance section.
But I think it's it is a sort of interesting moment because it makes you go. But it's a very funny thing about. And it's a funny thing for us about how we are on stage, because like neither of us can own it. We have to own it jointly all the time. Yeah. And it's a funny thing.
And how did you work with unison? I mean, was there more unison at the beginning, and then you took up some parts, or? Introduced more?
We liked it as a texture, and then we had to really ask ourselves questions about when it was used. And so we made a formal decision that whenever they spoke, they would always speak together. So if it says we say, there always has to be the two of them. But then also for the exercises, then we started to get loose because so you get it in a number of different sections.
It's a colouring device.
It's a colouring device. Yeah.
Not universally, but we tend to use it for sections that are either violent or sexual, actually, is what it comes down to. I mean, I don't think that was a particularly conscious decision, but it was certainly, when you look back on it now, you see those things, and you see that actually basically what we're just trying to do is we're trying to pick these little sections up and give them a bit of dramatic boost. It's a sort of technique.
And it's also, you can't listen to that for a long time. It's kind of pleasurable for maybe 3-4 minutes, and then it creates a kind of weird aural space that when it stops, you drop into a very different kind of territory, and so that's a sort of, because you could say in a way that the real task is to, how do you make people listen for 2.5 hours to something? It's like, how do you let your ear re-listen to re-engage, and because it changes the colour, it can do that.
Was one of your intention, the intention of the group, to make a contrast with some plays that are presented now, kind of more extravagant or more bigger, and I didn't see the real magic, but I hear it was more active, more dynamic. So did you want to be in contrast with some of these plays?
I think it's a funny thing. It's like sometimes it's like the text in this, for me, is so great. Like, it's so simple. Like, when it sort of felt wrong to kind of do something with it. It's like it's a difficult invitation to an audience to imagine this, but it asks you to see all of this. And many years ago, the reason I first read the book was that I saw a production of this by a Belgian theatre company, and they had 2 men playing the boys, and they did the text pretty much like we do at the beginning, and I thought, wow, this text is amazing. And then they had people play the grandmother and I hated it because the story is their telling of it. It's like grandmother only exists in their telling of grandmother somehow. So in some, sorry, I'm wandering, but I think in lots of ways, for many years, we've been trying to ask ourselves, what is theatre? Like, what can it be? What if you push it right to the edge over here? Or what if you do this to it? Is it still theatre? What happens? And so for us with this, it's probably the most minimal thing that we've made, I would say. And we really took everything away, and it was scary to do the first time. You really think, fuck, no idea how this will go. I mean, like, frightening. But I think sometimes when you, it's this weird thing about language and your ability to imagine. The more we give you, the less you imagine. And in a way, this was really an exercise in. It wasn't really in relationship to, extravagance in other places, I don't think.
But it is about. I think it is also about saying. I mean, I tend to think that this isn't an adaptation of the Notebook; it's an editing of the Notebook. And a presentation of it in a way, rather than an adaptation. I mean, and I do think the point about, in the text, the existence of the various people is in question, and the painting of those people is in question. And as soon as you try to embody one of those people, you lose that questioning. You lose the narrators are, well, I don't know if they're very unreliable, I think. I mean, I think you have to say that they're not, their relationship to the truth is, well, they have an idea about what the truth constitutes, and they try to follow it, but it is up for question, I think. And as soon as you start to embody any of those other people in that world, you've made a decision about what you extract from that telling. And for me, the pleasure of it is in presenting the question to an audience, not presenting an answer to them.
How to make us listen to the story. You talked about the musicians and the moment was it for that you, the little piece of theatre in the story when the twins it's one of the moments where you are sitting and was it necessary to make the audience listen, or was it a way for you to?
I think, I mean, we found it funny, of course, in the book, that they present a show, like fantastic, and I mean, in a way, that is exactly halfway, so it's like a break, and it gets a lot brighter, things become a bit looser, and it's like a little break, and then we go back for the second half. So it sort of does that in some ways. And it's very funny, I was really thinking about because we narrate all the things in the play about the smoking. The rich man is smoking, he throws the cigarettes to this one smokes. And I suddenly thought, yeah, of course, it's all about smoking. That's all it is. And actually, really, it's just an opportunity to do loads of smoking. And I did think, we should have done it with the cigarettes, but actually then it's like we break our own rules in a funny sort of way.
It's a really difficult thing. I mean, I think it's a really, it brings into question the whole enterprise, the whole project. I mean,
yes.
And I have to say, of the sections in the show, that's probably the one where we've changed what we do, or the approach that we have to it, more than anywhere else. I mean, like, we've gone through phases where we do it in a very sort of slightly large, big, melodramatic way. At the moment we're sort of tending to down to a slightly flat kind of quote childish delivery. But it's moved around a lot because it's a very slippy thing. I mean, and it's walking on thin ice, I think. I mean, it takes what you're doing and it kind of exposes it in a quite cruel way, I think. So it's always a difficult moment, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, kind of nice for that, but.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to spend too long in their plays, I don't think.
With the notebook, there is a particular relation to the audience because you're reading the story to the audience, so there is a direct connection, a lot of eye contact. Is it disturbing when the majority of the audience isn't watching you back, but watching the screen above and laughing before you say the funny stuff?
I mean, I think it's worth saying we can't actually see where you're looking. I mean, which is probably a relief. It would be probably very worrying if we could see everybody looking right over our heads. And of course, it's and if the joke comes out on the screen before it comes out of your mouth, you kind of go, oh. It's like, ugh.
That's always a difficult one.
But I have to say, it's. I think when we first did this with surtitles in Paris, we're performing it in English, and then we're translating it back into French. We're reading the English. They're going to be reading the French. This is completely insane.
Let's all go home and read the books.
I mean, at that kind of level, I think it can be a little bit absurd, but I think there's I guess if you really don't speak a word of English, it must be a very surreal experience. If I went to see The Notebook performed in Hungarian and then had to read the English subtitles on the top, I think I would be in a very strange place.
But there is, there is of course a thing about tone and
sure.
Yeah, and it's funny because here it's hard to see the audience, but we've just been in Lausanne and in Toulouse, and you're aware that maybe 50% of the audience, maybe it varies. Not everybody is up here all the time. Some people are here. Some people are checking up here, of course. Some people are really reading. When you make a larger pause, then of course people's eye comes down. So it's like ways to make your presence be felt in a way. That's sort of something that you can do. But it is a strange thing, and for that very reason, we were quite worried about presenting The Notebook with subtitles, whether they were Polish or whatever, French, German. Just that it would be too hard for an audience.
I do think there is a the function of subtitles changes a lot according to your relationship with the original text. I've been to see Japanese pieces where I just have to read the subtitles. I can snatch a moment where I can look down when they stop talking, but most of the time it's
or you stop reading.
Yeah, and you stop reading them and enjoy the texture, but when I'm at home, there's an interesting thing. If my wife is German, and if we watch English language stuff, she puts English language subtitles underneath, because she speaks very good English, but occasionally she loses a word, and if she can read it, it really helps. And I think in a way that's a sort of illustration of how one would hope subtitling works. It's like, yeah, I know what you're saying, but what's that word? Right, okay. It's a different relationship to the one that goes.
To play The Notebook in places which are not theatres, for example, where people are very close to you, and if you envisage it?
We've only really presented it in theatres, but here it's for me, I prefer it when we're on the flat and the audience is like this and we're a little bit closer. That's my preference. Here there's a raise and you're a little bit further away. It's okay, it can work in this context, but then it's much more of a picture in a way. And when we played it in London, and it was in really quite a small room, probably from that wall to maybe here with the audience there, so very close, and we didn't use the floor, and it was just us. It was kind of nice. The only thing is it's very overpowering. It's like you feel, and also when it's quiet as an audience member, you can feel people like this. like trying not to cough. And so in some ways, of course, this intimacy is nice, but also it's hard work for you. So like, in a way, a little bit of space allows you some opportunity to relax. Otherwise, a bit of privacy. Yeah. Otherwise, it's hard. But it can work, of course, in different ways. Though I think it's interesting that, like, because we have a big question sometimes when we do it, like whether to use the black curtains around the thing, and it's funny because the dense black is sort of useful, actually, I think, in this, because like there's nothing to see, there's nothing there, so it's like it's a place in which you can project stuff in your head in a funny kind of way. It's like we played recently in Toulouse, and the walls are like a very red brick. And I kept looking at it thinking, I don't know, should we take away all the curtains? Yeah. But it's hard. But there's sort of, they're complicated. When you have so little on stage, you're very, you tend to be very precise with what. So yeah, this intimacy thing, which is what your question is about, is interesting because, of course, in some ways it's very nice when it's close, but also it can really burn you. So it can be different.
And I mean, I think that I can think of pieces that we've made that really do like that kind of intimacy.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But this is a slightly strange one because although we are, looking out, we are reading to you, there's also a kind of distance, there's a kind of, they're not normal, those people, really. Let's be honest.
There's a high degree of formality to what's
so there's a sort of strange ambiguity, I think, going on there about how really present they are, or what kind of presence they have. I can think of other pieces that we've done where it's very nice to feel like you're really just in the room with people chatting to them. This is a bit different.
Je vais poser une question en français, désolé. Du coup, vous avez travaillé à l'université dans un groupe pendant 3 ans, et il se trouve que c'est le cas aussi pour la majorité d'entre nous, même si c'est juste pour 2 ans. Et est-ce que vous auriez un conseil Non, mais vraiment, qu'est-ce qui vous a tenu votre groupe? Qu'est-ce qui vous a tenu? Qu'est-ce qui vous a fait vraiment travailler ensemble?
Yeah, I think I'm following that. I think there is working as a group is just fucking difficult. I'm sorry, but it is. It really is, and I don't think we ever make we've been making pieces for 34 years, and we still find it incredibly difficult. The last piece we made, this piece that we were talking about, Out of Order, which is lots of running around, it was hell to make. It's odd because I think sometimes people think that working collectively should be easy, but it's not. There's a really good reason why people go, oh yeah, you do the writing, I'll just do the acting bit, somebody else will do the lighting. There are really good reasons why people do that, because it's easier. But you have to have a genuine desire and commitment to the idea that you want to do something together. And just to return to the thing about Exeter, where we all studied, the 5 of us who studied at Exeter, out of the 6 in Forced Entertainment's artistic group, we weren't all in the same year. We cover 3 different years. So there were lots of people that I spent 3 years working collectively with who I very happily never see again in my life. You don't. Do you know what I mean? You have to choose your friends. Right? you have to choose those people that you want to work collectively with. It's not a. Do you know what I mean? It's not a thing that just blossoms.
And I think also the whole thing was strange though, because we didn't set out to do this for 34 years. I mean, nobody would do that. They must be mad. I mean, we thought, okay, we'll do this for a while, and we want to be like our heroes who we really admire. So we'll do it for 5 years. If we don't get anywhere, then we'll give up. And basically every year, I would say, there's always at least one person saying, I think this is the last one. I'm not going to do another one, Rob. and then it's like, oh, we're going to make another show. And you go, all right, okay. You think, oh yeah, actually that would be interesting. Yeah, good. Yeah.
At the point in your life where you realise that you're completely unqualified to do anything else, you suddenly go, no, it's all right. I can just leave it all behind and start a job as.
No, we can't. So now we have to do it for at least another 8 years, and then we can retire.
But yeah, I mean, seriously though, I do think that it's a difficult business, trying to work together with people, and I think the thing that you really learn, well, for me, that you learn over a while is that if you're a kind of individual, if you're a writer, let's say, you can produce the perfect thing. I mean, it's possible. No? You can sit down and you can write, and you can go, yeah, I've revised this 25 times, and this is the greatest novel, play, film script, whatever, that has ever been written. But when you work collectively, you can throw that out of the window. It's never going to be your perfect work, because you are always going to be involved in the business of compromise and negotiation, and I guess at a certain point you have to say, the fact of the matter is, I'm not quite the genius that I thought I was. And maybe, just maybe, all those people that I work with make something together that none of us could make individually, and that, although it may not be my perfect plan of the ultimate performance, is nevertheless actually better than what my perfect plan of the ultimate performance would be. Do you know what I mean? There has to be a slight change of. I mean, it's weird because when you're creating things, when you're making things, you're supposed to follow your inspiration and have this kind of like vision of what it is that you want to make. But when you're doing that collectively, you have to kind of go, yeah, okay, but not that bit, and not that bit, and not that bit. It's just how it works.
So nobody left. But did you try sometimes to introduce someone else?
No, we left. We lost people.
You lost people.
We lost at least 2.
We lost 2.
Yeah.
Gained 1.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in. The 2 went in 1986, and we gained 1 in 1989, and then it hasn't changed since then.
Although I have to say,
though we do, I mean,
people we work with a lot.
We do work with other people. So if we make a project and we invite, say, maybe 4 people to come and work with us, or sometimes we make a project with fewer of the whole group, like The Notebook. So over the years, it really varies, of course, and that in a way keeps the company alive, because you're having to renegotiate your position, the dynamic shift. And so
for example, there's a lighting designer who we've worked with for the best part of 25 years, more maybe. Jerry, who is the other male performer in Real Magic, for those people that saw it. I mean, he's not technically speaking a member of the artistic team of Forced Entertainment, but it's a long time since we've made a larger piece that doesn't have...
Worked with him for about 16 years.
Yeah, so, yeah, Matt.
And yeah, no, I think that's quite important.
Yeah.
And yeah. Yeah, shut up. No, I've not got anything interesting.
J'aimerais savoir, j'ai vu Real Magic, désolé je parle. J'ai vu Real Magic et donc The Notebook, et j'ai remarqué à chaque fois il y a un truc très intelligent dans vos pièces, c'est-à-dire une sorte de processus de création et de mise en scène que vous tenez à chaque fois sur 1h30, 2 heures. Et j'aimerais savoir à quel moment, vous savez, à quel moment vous êtes convaincu que ce que vous faites, c'est bon.
I think you're talking about what's the point at which you say, right, okay, that's that's what we want to make. Okay. That's the thing.
That's the point of decision.
Mm-hmm. I think it's this. I think we make at certain points we make decisions about what we are going to do in the general sense. So to decide that we would do a performance of The Notebook that would have Richard and myself in it, that probably did happen at a certain point that you can say, yeah, okay. But precisely how that was going to look, how much of The Notebook we were going to do, how much we were going to edit, how much we were going to what we were going to look like on the stage, how much or how little or how very little or just a little movement there was going to be. For example, we spent a long time sitting at a table not unlike this one, just reading it side by side. Those things tend to happen more gradually, so that it kind of, there's a kind of snowball effect, that you make a basic decision about what the piece is going to be, and then you have a kind of pragmatic, a very, a practical relationship. You say, well, the thing about sitting at the table is it's very pure. Undoubtedly, it's exactly what it says but it's a little bit boring. So maybe we should move around just a bit. Just, nothing extravagant, but just a bit. So I think you're constantly making these decisions, and for example, I can remember when you guys first did the game show routine in Real Magic, yeah. And I was away. I was supposed to be working on that project. I was away that week. I came back and they said, we found this great thing. It's like a game show. It goes like this. And they showed it to Kathy and I, the other performer who wasn't there. And we looked at it and we said, it's fantastic, it's great. So how are we going to fit into that? Okay. And we spent about 3 weeks trying to put 2 more performers into that, and then said, it doesn't really work. And then we spent probably another 3 weeks kind of going, well, okay, so there's the little game show thing. What's the rest of the show? And then we realised that actually that was the rest of the show. So, I don't know, the moment at which you say, oh yeah, definitely that, it happens a bit. You say, we really like that game show thing. But you don't necessarily know that that's going to be the whole show. You don't necessarily know what the space is going to look like. That's something that you're going to explore and expand all the time that you're working. And then, I think earlier on I said something about, there comes a point where you say, we're just not going to make any changes anymore. And I think that's almost, I hesitate to call it a great moment of clarity. It's more like a moment of exhaustion where you say, actually, you know what, I really can't deal with this anymore. I can't think of new things to do, and it may be that you've gone past the point where you were thinking constructively or creatively about a thing. I think
there's also a strange thing when you're making something, and this is even true of The Notebook. Like when we were first thinking, could this be something? Like when you manage to make something that lasts longer than 20 minutes, it's interesting. Because you can do anything for 20 minutes, and it can be interesting. But has something really got, we'd say, has it got legs? Can it really run? You know? So, like with Real Magic, we had an improvisation one day, and we kind of made the first 20 minutes of the piece, kind of. And then we went, yeah, it's kind of fun for 20 minutes, but really. And then we went back and we made some more. And then, like, when you have 40 minutes, then you start to say, that's weird. Is it 40 minutes of this, and then some more of something else? Or how much more of is this? So then we have to go back in the mine, and we have to dig and see if we can find another 20 minutes. Like, is there, you know? And with this, like when we were touring another project, to be reading this and say, okay, what is this like to sit and listen to for 40 minutes or 50 minutes? Like in a way, all these things are, you discover the answers practically by doing things. And that's how we work. And, you know, I think you know when something feels like it's the right idea, or feels like a clue, and then you follow that. And with this, for the set, because I do the set design, I had this floor that was all wooden floorboards and a back wall that was like made of wood, like grandmother's house. Just too much. Like, it tells you far too much. You're pretending like you're there. And then we turned the floor upside down, so we looked at the other side of it and went, that's nicer. And we took away the wall. And we went, yeah, it's better. So it's a very funny process of arriving at those things.
No, but thank you. I think we are reaching the point of exhaustion also for us all. So thank you, Robin and Richard.
Thank you.
And